It's
more or less started.
Thank you, Chairman. We're now live on YouTube, so you can start the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. Welcome everybody to this virtual meeting of the Audit Committee. My name is Councillor Peter Marriott and I'm the chairman of this committee. I'm supported this evening by officers, Gail Beaton, who's the Internal Audit Manager, Graham Clark, Strategic Director, and Kimberly Sohn, who's the Democratic Services Officer and will be the clerk for this meeting. I think we all know the usual practice now. Please use the hand raise function within Zoom to indicate you wish to speak. Please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. Please can I ask, keep questions brief and to the point. Also, as I've experienced myself only a few days ago, if members lose their connection temporarily, we will pause to allow them time to rejoin the meeting. If the webcast stream fails, then we will also have to adjourn until we are able to reset the connection. Okay, well, that's all the introduction. Can we move straight on to item 1 in the agenda, the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 2nd of March 2020. Are there any comments, any corrections we need to make to that? None. Can I just say on this one, Kimberly, that there were 2 implied actions. When would be the best time to take those at this point?
Yes, Chair.
There was an issue about the car parking charges, and we agreed that the meeting would be transcribed to get the correct wording. There was the lack of understanding of what members thought they understood. Has that been done?
Chairman, it's Graham. Yes,
Graham.
Yes, that was done. And I mean, these minutes have been through council now. It was done before the last council meeting, so they are available if members want to see them. I can't remember because it was a good couple of months ago. Who or when exactly they were sent to, but I can certainly find that, Chairman, yes.
Okay, thank you. The second one related to the air quality data and the lessons learned have been captured. So it was just to make sure that that had actually been undertaken.
It's Gail Beaton. Yes, I can confirm that the lessons learned were picked up as part of the air quality review that was done by internal audit, following up on the investigation that was completed. Yep. And the outcome of that was reported in the latest report regarding the follow-up of the air quality review.
Yes, I think the the sense of that comment was really to look at the way any data is collected and lessons learned from those processes, not just relating to air quality.
I have got a review that I haven't put into the plan yet, but because I was waiting for the half year for us to review the plan. And there is 2 reviews that were highlighted as part of the last audit minutes. One was looking at where there is only one individual involved in a process, and the other being where there is a need to collate information and provide it to third parties. And I feel that that will be picking up on the area regarding data quality, the timeliness, and ensuring that it's reported in the correct way by the correct deadline to the correct individuals.
Okay, thank you, Gail. Those were actions as minuted, 2 implied actions. We agreed that we would have a detailed discussion on the revised property investment strategy. So that needs to be carried forward as an action to set up such as a meeting.
Chairman, it's Graham. Can I just check, would you like that on your formal agenda or as a councillor briefing, sort of offline with a report back?
Yeah. I think we agreed to do it offline and then report back.
Okay, we can set that up,
If that's
Chairman,
okay. Yeah, thank you. And then the other one, this was Gail to provide an internal costed audit plan.
Yes, with regard to the plan, I do have a costed plan, but unfortunately I haven't included it in these papers, unfortunately. But what I can do, I can circulate that to members, which will include the cost of the service delivery. One question I would wish to ask as to whether you want me to include the cost relating to the in-house service as well as the contractor service that we've contracted out.
How much work would that entail? Is that a big job to do?
No.
Okay, well, why not include it then, if we can? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other queries on the minutes? If not, can I ask the committee to confirm the minutes? Everybody agreed?
Looks like it, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, next item, number 2, apologies for absence. Any apologies, Kimberly?
No apologies, Chairman.
Michaela Gray, I think.
Apologies, yes, Michaela Gray has apologised.
Yeah, I thought she was on, yeah. Okay, thank you. Item 3, disclosure of interests. Have there been any, Kimberly?
No disclosures, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 4, questions by members of the public.
No questions, Chairman.
None, thank you. Item 5, question from members.
We had no questions submitted by the deadline, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Item 6 is the updated external audit scope for 2019-20. That's on pages 6 to 11 of the notes.
Okay, Chair, would you like me to introduce that short document?
If you would, please, John.
Yes, okay, great. Well, obviously we've had the whole circumstances of COVID and the lockdown thrust upon us, as all organisations have, and how we're responding. This is the content of the letter. So we've I'd break those down into 3 headings. So logistical, technical, and the third one, the value for money. So in terms of the logistics side of things, I think the pandemic has actually brought innovation and has brought progress and modernization. So things like the ability to communicate through this type of call means that we can, by and large, perform the audit effectively, even remotely. We've just gone through the whole of our NHS portfolio for the year and been able to do that entirely through remote audit. So I think that's encouraging for the committee to be reassured to know that it's had a bit of a trial run and audits do work delivered in this way, but they do take longer, and you do have to think more about the logistics and the communications as you deal with your planning. We've also got a secure IT-based system that can transfer documents from the council to our audit team. The audit team can work on them, and we can interact with your officers through that secure IT process as well. So again, that gives you the reassurance that the audit can be conducted. The Secretary of State has extended the audit timeline up until the 30th of November. We don't anticipate that we'll need that long to complete the audit of Waverley, but it's still certainly good to know that there's reassurance around government's expectations regarding the whole audit process across local audit, that the quality of the audit must be maintained. So government has given us extra time to do that, to ensure that that's the case. So then on the technical side, and the letter sets out our current views on the main technical areas that will be affected by COVID as it applies to your statement of accounts. And that's more around the valuations in those accounts, whether it's on property, plant and equipment or investments. The pensions disclosures certainly will be impacted in terms of the investments that the pension fund makes. Also disclosures around the council's views around impairments of valuations, and disclosures around going concern, I think will be particularly important. For members to bear in mind as well that going concern, the whole audit is very much backwards looking. We look at the 1920 financial year, and the balance sheet date is 31st of March 2020. But from a going concern perspective, we'd be looking for evidence supporting the council's going concern disclosures for 12 months following the date of our audit opinion. So if we sign in September this year, we'd be looking for assurances around your going concern estimations up until September 2021. So that's going to be quite a key period for local government finances. So I think that's going to be an important area of our audit as we look forward to those supporting evidence around those disclosures. And then finally on value for money, and councillors might have expected more work related to the council's response to COVID under our Value for Money Code objective, but that's not the case. And the reason why that's not the case is that the date of the audit is intended to look at the arrangements as at the 31st of March 2020, when we were still very early on in the lockdown period and the pandemic. So we have a sort of to look at 1920 in the round, when COVID wasn't making a massive impact across the whole of 1920. We'll certainly be picking it up in next year's audit, but for the purposes of this year, we'll focus on the value for money assessment as we previously communicated with you, but with some more closer attention around business continuity arrangements as would have been in place in March. So that's where we've reassessed the audit. We've issued to officers a addendum to the plan, which pretty much covers the ground in this letter, and really just completes that picture of formal communication with you. And we're continuing to interact well with your officers. In fact, last week we held a planning meeting as we run into the financial statements audit now, and that all feels in a good place. That we understand the issues, we understand the way of working together, and we don't see that the difficult and unique circumstances that we're operating under will be a significant obstacle to us being able to deliver the audit.
Okay, thank you. So you're looking at September when you would complete the external audit? That's what we
planned to do at this stage, which allows some contingency as well. We know that the final date that we would have to hit is 30th of November, but we should be able to achieve that beforehand.
I was a little surprised not to see one of your bullet points to include reserves policy, because obviously COVID-19 has had a big impact on the council's reserves. And going forward, that must be a risk if we have a repeat of what's happened this year.
Yes, we'd pick that up in the going concern because that is forward looking. So yeah, absolutely, we
Okay,
would
it's part of
expect
that,
you
yeah.
to give consideration to that as it
Yeah.
unfolds over the next 12 months.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from members to John? No questions?
If I may, Chairman,
Jerome, thank you.
I've lost my hand.
Hmm.
A question for you, John, is are you at all looking at our revised budget as part of your review of our robustness for the future, or is that out of scope?
No, that would be how you're responding, and revising the budget would be part of the financial sustainability work under value for money. Yes.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Richard, I think you'd like to speak.
Yes, please. Thank you. A quick question, really. We've been hearing a lot as members about the proposed unitary authority proposal that Surrey County Council have submitted to the government. And I wondered, at what point would that be brought to the Audit Committee? Would it be involved in risk in the same way that you've done a separate set of risk relating to COVID? Because it's going to be huge upheaval and disruption if the one unitary authority goes ahead. So it'd be interesting just to get a perspective of where that might come into audit, if at all, and certainly into these.
That would very much be a matter for next year's audit rather than this year's. Yeah.
Thank you.
Chairman, I have Councillor Cole, Councillor Seaborn, and then Graham.
Councillor Coleman, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Going back to the looking forward review for the coming year, is the council going to present you with a plan that it's going to follow this year? Because otherwise, I don't know what you're auditing. So there's clearly things that lots going to change.
Yeah,
so
that's how it should work. Yeah.
So what plan is the council going to put forward? I mean, this is a back question to officers. Then, what plan is going to be put forward that will be audited by the auditors?
Chairman, yeah, it's Graham. Shall I'd put my hand up actually to come back on a bundle of these questions. Do you want me to do them one by one, or come back at the end? Up to you.
Well, perhaps one by one would be easy, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
even
sure.
in context. Thank you.
Well, shall I start with Councillor Coles? I'll do them in reverse order. So as John said, we met virtually with Grant Thornton last week and took them through our recovery programme, our revised budget, and talked quite a lot about the final accounts for last financial year, which whilst at the point of the balance sheet, 31st of March, our finances were sort of largely unscathed at that point. But clearly in the accounts themselves, the narrative reflects the fact that quite a lot has changed between the 31st of March and the point of us publishing our unaudited accounts. And at the point where we bring those to the Audit Committee for approval, we'll need to be talking quite a lot about what's happened since the balance sheet date. So in terms of going forward, we'll be working with Grant Thornton as we go through our monitoring of our revised budget and as we work up our medium-term financial plan. And earlier on, there were references to reserves policy that will feature in our medium-term financial plan. And the Value for Money Overview and Scrutiny Committee will be looking closely at that on its journey through to Executive and Council in the autumn. So the last time we took the reserves up to Council was in February alongside the budget, and we'll be having a very close look at where we are in the light of our revised budget and the wider economy, and our projections for income and expenditure going forward. Many of which have changed over the last 5 or 6 months. So there's a lot of work to do there, and it's really important that we work with John and his team to learn from what others are doing, and also to give some assurance to our external auditors about the robustness of what we're doing. So That will be ongoing over the next 2 or 3 months, leading up to a council approval on a new medium-term financial plan. Hopefully, Chairman, that's picked up the points raised so far, but obviously happy to take any more questions.
I come back, Chairman, just on that. In terms of things like property valuations, I mean, that who knows what property valuation might be going forward. I mean, are you going to discuss that with the auditors? I mean, in terms of how things will be valued and come to consensus, or are you going to say one thing and the auditors will say no, that's clearly not true? What's the how do you deal with that kind of point where there can't be very much agreement yet as to what's going to happen?
Well, maybe I can start, and then John can give the external auditor's perspective. Because so again, coming at a balance sheet date, we've there was not a lot of impact at that point, but the valuation, clearly we've taken into account the guidance that's come out since, that's picked up the sort of COVID impact coming from CITFA, coming from Grant Thornton, and taking account of that. I mean, going forward, yeah, I mean, we have to value in accordance with the statutory guidance and the codes of practice that come out. And I believe one of the roles that Grant Thornton play is to, have a dialogue with us about that, make sure we are doing things properly and by the book. And as I say, what we often do is get the benefit of Grant Thornton's experience elsewhere, where there have been particularly sort of complex asset valuation issues that have arisen, and people have found, in conjunction with their auditors, solutions to that. And the impact of COVID, some of that, we will only emerge over the next few months, particularly in relation to some of our investment properties. So I think the position we've presented in our pre-audit accounts is based on the best information that we've got at the moment, and we'll be working in the coming weeks with Grant Thornton on that. And hopefully Grant Thornton will be assured that we followed the proper guidance at the time. But of course, it doesn't end there, because we will be continuing to work over the remaining part of this financial year to make sure that this year's accounts are all in order. I don't know if, John, you've got anything from your perspective to add to that.
Sure. The audit of valuation information is a well sort of trodden path, really, and it's been a high priority for audit firms, particularly of recent years, to really make sure that the valuations are as good as they can be. Important to recognise that valuation in itself is an expert service, so the council engages its own experts to perform the valuation, professionally qualified. Our role then is to check that expertise. Can we rely on that expertise? Check the data that has been provided to the valuer, and challenge a number of the assumptions that the valuer has come up with. As Graham has said, and as Councillor Cole alluded to, this year is extremely difficult given the uncertain world that we're in, and the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors is giving guidance, and does give guidance around the valuations piece as impacted by the pandemic. At the moment, that guidance is saying that it expects valuers to record valuation uncertainty, significant valuation uncertainty. And if that ends up as the case, when your audit is completed, we would highlight in our audit report an emphasis of matter, drawing attention to those disclosures of valuation uncertainty. That wouldn't be a qualification, but it would be something that we would be talking to you about at the time.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Deere.
Thank you. I only come from the world of commerce rather than local authorities, but in my understanding, it was a significant post-balance sheet event, then that needs to be reflected in at least a comment to the accounts of the preceding year. I have to say, I'm a member of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, and I know nothing about what their guidance is at the moment, other than I think whatever it is, it'll probably be wrong, because clearly, there's an awful lot of people have an awful lot of uncertainty about where things are going. But could you just clarify if there's any obligation to make any comment about any significant post-balance sheet events as far as the accounts currently being considered are concerned? Thanks.
There is always that responsibility to consider post-balance sheet events, to consider their nature, whether they're adjusting or non-adjusting, and clearly the date of the balance sheet depends on whether something is a post-balance sheet event or not. In the case of COVID, it was circumstances and factors known about at the time of the balance sheet. So I would argue that there is a great deal of your accounts where it isn't post-balance sheet. It's actually within the reporting period itself.
And will be taken into account thus?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I've got Councillor Seaborne's hand up, Chairman.
Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, one very simple question to either Graham or Peter. On page 7 of the grant thought, or page 7 of our papers, it states that the target for submission of draft financial statements was 15th of July. Did we hit that? So that's one question. And then I was also listening to John at the start. I was really pleased to hear that technology has helped us get over the worst of the humps to doing the audit work. John, do you have any feeling for whether anything has come out of this that's actually going to be able to be taken forward to next year to smooth the audit process? You know, have the technological lessons thrown up anything that is going to make life easier in the future? Thank you, Chairman.
Shall I answer that last question first? And that's a good question, a really good question, and a lot of conversation has already been about what the new normal will be like when we come out of lockdown, when we come out of pandemic. And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of learning from experiences that we've all been going through that we will want to make stick. For example, we audit the council from out of because of the, as explained to the committee previously, because of an ethical conflict. We've audited the council from a team outside of our most local team. So your auditors come from a combination of the Southwest and the Midlands. Clearly, one of those big savings is the travel time and the accommodation costs and the stayaways that the team would have normally done to delivering the audit in a traditional way. So that's the biggest sort of benefit to me is that we can use remote working to create efficiencies and cost savings. What we need to make sure of, though, is we don't lose efficiency because we can't be in the same room as people. So what we were talking to your officers about last week is some form of hybrid capabilities as your offices are now open, that if we did need to come on site for limited periods of time, we could do that. We could do that to maybe iron out any problems that we might be encountering, that a face-to-face communication would be the better way of doing it. And if we needed to within our own team as well, if we needed to communicate certain things with our own team, we can do that face-to-face as well now rather than virtually. So it'll be when we come out of lockdown, it'll be a combination of this remote working and the more historical ways of working. But yeah, I'm really encouraged by the potential that it has to modernize things. The date you quoted about the reporting, and I'm not sure if maybe we've picked it up or not explained it clearly enough, but the reporting deadline for councils was July to produce draft accounts. That's been extended to the 31st of August.
Chairman, can I? Sorry, Peter, do you want to just update on what happened last week?
Yeah, small event. We published draft accounts on the net last week. So the pre-audit accounts were handed over to the auditors, and they're on the website available. So all good.
Excellent. Good. Make good holiday reading. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
No more hands up, Chair.
Yes, no more questions. Okay, well, perhaps I can bring this item to a close and thank John very much for his report.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next item then. The item 7, the briefing on the risk register discussions that we had last week. Graham, you're going to lead this discussion.
Chairman, it was really to, well, firstly, thank members for attending last Thursday, but then to really ask you and the committee what you want to happen next, because last Thursday was a flavour, and thank you to Peter for running through the toolkit and the register. There are many different ways that audit committees can engage in the whole risk agenda, and we've done over the years at Waverley it in a number of different ways, and it's whatever suits the chairman and the committee. And it can be an awful lot of detail on many occasions, or it can be a couple of sort of check-ins each year with your heads of service there to get into a lot of detail around risk registers. So I think this item, nice, as a sort of a discussion item, just follows on from last Thursday. And I think I would just ask you and the committee, Chairman, what do you want to happen next? I think on Thursday we were steering towards having an offline session with the committee and the latest risk register and the appropriate officers in the virtual room, so that members can ask questions, understand the risk scenarios, and obviously challenge, add new ones, challenge whether the mitigation's okay. I think that's where we were steering by the end of the hour on Thursday. So if that's where you want this to go, Chairman, then we can absolutely set that up and have a very focused session going through the latest strategic risk register. Now that was very much around strategic risk, at an operational level, which I'm sure members wouldn't want to get into necessarily, not the committee. There's a lot of other sort of good risk management practice that happens with projects and just day-to-day stuff around HR and health and safety, etc. But I think within the remit of this committee, it's very much looking at the arrangements that we've got in place to manage strategic risks and aligned to the corporate objectives that the council set itself. So in other words, looking at things that may blow us off course, checking in to see whether we have the arrangements in place to track, monitor, look at the mitigations, evaluate the risk, and that's happening. And that's pretty much where we've had some really good value work done by the audit committee in the past. And I think, officers have actually taken quite a lot of comfort from that interest that the audit committee's shown in it in the past. So that's where I would suggest that we go, just because I've seen it work in the past with audit committees, but it is entirely up to the committee as to where you go next with this. I mean, it's a relatively young audit committee still, and so it's the perfect time really to get stuck into it. Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if Peter's got anything to add to that.
Councillor Davidson has his hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the things which we did conclude on was the suggestion from Councillor Seaborn that we break out the categorization of the risks to include the different classes. And I think that might make it much easier for members of the committee to be able to review the final assessment of the risks. And my understanding is that Peter reckoned this work could be concluded in about 3 weeks' time, by the time he returns from leave.
Yes, thank you, Jerome. I think Graham's proposals is very sound. It's something that I think mentioned before on a number of occasions, going through the risk register in some detail, so on a line-by-line basis. And I think at the last Thursday's meeting, one of the issues I raised there was the aspect of mitigation, what that actually means, and whether that should be listed in a much more proactive way. So those areas I think would be very useful to address in some detail at a future meeting, particularly since I seem to only be present for half the time at Thursday because of my internet problems. So hopefully that's cleared up a little bit today. We are holding up at the moment. What do other members feel about going forward?
Chair, if I may, just two things. I love the idea of having an online session with the risk register. Shows a bit how sad I am, but I think it's a brilliant idea, particularly with so much going on around COVID, the need to reboot the local economy. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the strategic risks that we have potentially around unitary authority proposals. So I think I'm very much up for that, and anything else like that. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
I have no other indications, Chairman.
No, there we are. Okay, then can we leave it with Graham to set up this meeting? And you think you're suggesting something like middle to end of August as a suitable window?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine, Chairman. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, does that conclude that item? Find my, too many buttons to press here. Just one question on that, Graham. I assume that the risk register is something that the Audit Committee recommends, essentially approves and recommends to Council when it's agreed.
It actually doesn't need to recommend it to Council. I think the role of, I think if we, I can't remember the precise words, but I think if we looked at the terms of reference for the Audit Committee, it refers to the Audit Committee keeping oversight of the arrangements in place to ensure robust management of risk. And that is a function of the Audit Committee to do that. I think if only if you had any major concerns about how that was operating, that you would pass to the executive. So it wouldn't, I couldn't see a recommendation going through to Council other than, again, if you're resetting the policy on risk management, and potentially that would, or it might stop with this committee, I would just need to check with Fiona about whether that's delegated to this committee or not. But nevertheless, the discussion would go through in the minutes of the meeting to Council, so Council could see that the Audit Committee are fulfilling that function and looking at and having a debate about the risk arrangements.
Okay. I suppose the only issue that comes to mind when we're looking at that list is what do you do about unmanageable risks? I mean, if there was another pandemic, say this time next year, which you rely on government support to keep the council operating, how do you tackle that sort of problem?
I think one of the reasons for sort of going through a risk management process is to check in where you are with your mitigation, but also to anticipate both problems and opportunities that may or may not be around the corner, and that's a good example, Chairman. So another spike of this pandemic and the impact that it could have, and our preparedness for that might well be something that comes out of the conversation. In fact, I would expect it to be honest, and that's the benefit of doing this in a sort of an informal setting where we can properly discuss those sorts of things without alarming everybody about the negative side of managing risk, and then we can decide at that session how to package that up and bring it back to the committee. But I think that sort of detailed discussion around what the risks are, what's being managed effectively, and what could be around the corner is will answer some of those questions actually. And we as an officer team will benefit from the experience and insight from the members on the committee as well.
Thank you, Graham. Okay. No more questions. So can we close that item now and move on to item 8. So this is Gail to review the progress in the implementation of internal audit recommendations, pages 12 to 17. Gail, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, agenda item 8, it details the recommendations that have not been implemented by the agreed target date. And I must admit, officers have been doing such a good job trying to ensure that action has been taken. And as you can see, there is only 3 of these. There is one of them that actually isn't due until the end of the month. But as you can see, they do relate to enforcement and SIL. The head of service is hoping that he will have all 3, because obviously 2 are overdue, that he will have all 3 completed by the end of the month. And hence he felt what would be appropriate to ask for an extension, bearing in mind he's already got to the 31st for one of his recommendations. And I hope the audit committee are hope you're happy with that, because I must admit it has taken a lot of work to get to this stage regarding all the recommendations.
I've got
Are there any
Councillor
questions from
Seaborn there.
members? I notice, Richard, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm perfectly happy with what's been proposed, not least because 2 of these are sort of operational and then they're made more challenging by the current situation, so I'm not sure how urgent they are. With regard to the second one, although it's not our remit to consider the output, I think quite a lot of Waverley members are of the opinion that enforcement in Waverley is not necessarily always as vigorous as members would like. And I just wonder whether this committee might like to recommend that the completed action is then taken to Environment ONS for review before being accepted, because that's more of a policy issue rather than an operational detail like the other 2. And I've actually spoken to the head of environmental, the chair of environmental ONS, and she thinks it would be a thoroughly good idea as well. So I don't know what colleagues think, but I certainly think that rather than just ticking the box to say the action's being done, I think it might be an action that would benefit from review by a body that's charged with reviewing the actual output. So maybe other colleagues would like to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Could I just ask before we do that, perhaps Kimberly could just expand on that item a little bit. I'm not that familiar with what we mean by local planning enforcement. What does that cover?
I believe the local planning enforcement is to do with when planning applications go through, whether the actual planning application is carried out as per the conditions, etc.
Yeah, Chairman, it's the enforcement function that Victoria Chillarton runs under Beth Howland Smith's sort of oversight, and yeah, as Kimberly said, it's the sort of function of ensuring planning is done properly. It's a tricky area. There's lots of judgments involved. I think. I mean, in terms of the audit committee's role, what were you thinking of there, Chairman? Just the reference from Gail's report.
Well, basically, I mean, I think it's, well, in my mind, you have this confliction. You have the issues of making sure planning developments meet the required standards. At the same time, developers can exercise their option to claim that a development is not viable. So, we don't enforce the original planning consent, do we? We don't enforce a plan.
Yeah, so planning enforcement isn't about renegotiating Section 106s and things like that. It's very much on the ground.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I'm Chairman, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be an expert, I have to say. So I think if it's something that this committee want to look at the governance around that, then that's fine. All I would say is there is a review in the making at the moment with the portfolio holder and executives that will probably work its way through ONS fairly soon. And I think, which is fine because that's the service aspect of it. I think if there are governance aspects or concerns that this committee want to look at, then what I'd suggest is wait until that report goes through to ONS. Listen to the debate there and then see if you want to pick it up on one of your agendas, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Graham. Have you got Richard, hand up?
Sorry, I just need to put my hand down again. That's
okay.
on my
And George.
Putting my planning committee hat on, I feel at the moment we're very vulnerable with enforcement. There have been a couple of recent planning applications that we have agreed to that actually had, I think it was visibility lines, which were disputed by some of the people who'd written to us anyway. We actually allowed them, but I think we need to answer people's queries if these things do not happen quite quickly, because obviously developers, I'm afraid, are taking advantage at the moment of the situation we're in. So I do think it's quite a strong thing that we need to be pushing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Any other comment?
If I can just add, in support of Councillor Seaborn, Chairman, I think it would be helpful to have this passed to the ONS committee to be aware of this action having been completed, and in conjunction with the document or proposals being put forward by the executive that Graham mentioned. I think that would be possibly a good trigger for that ONS committee to relook at how effective our enforcement actually is. Because I agree, it doesn't seem, as a outside viewer, to be as effective as I would like to see it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? No. Okay, we have two recommendations on this item. That the committee considers the information contained in Annex 1 and following discussion identifies any action it wishes to be taken. And secondly, recommended that the committee considers the head of services justification for a change in the due date for the agreed action listed in Annex 2 and agree on an appropriate implementation date. Just one thing there, Annex 2, which is Annex, and Gail?
I was just going to come in to that. Unfortunately, the agenda cover wasn't changed because there is no Annex 2. As I mentioned in my presentation, presenting the paper, is that the head of service decided that he wouldn't ask for an extension because one of his recommendations was already set for the end of the month. So I do apologise for that.
So do we keep both those recommendations?
Only recommendation 1 is applicable. And again, I think the committee have indicated which action it wishes to take. Okay.
Okay. So the actions, can you, perhaps Kimberly, can you summarise what the, if you like, the decisions were, which imply actions from the discussion?
Okay. So I don't think, it was more to, I don't think we had any actions actually, it was more of a discussion. I haven't got any actions.
No specific actions, okay. Okay, then can I ask the committee to agree the recommendation 1. Everybody agreed?
Agreed.
Seems to be positive on all counts, Chairman.
Sorry, Kimberly, missed that.
Everybody put their thumb up.
Oh, good, thank you. Okay, let's move on to item 9, which is the progress on the internal audit plan, pages 18 to 50.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Presented before the committee are the plan, closure of the plan for 2019-20, which details the work that has been completed. And you can see there, I've also included in there the positive customer feedback that I've had. Can I just say thank you to all those members who also fed into that? Thank you very much. Which is on page 25. Again, the plan is now 100% complete. Sorry, I'm flicking down. And as you can see, all the reviews have now had a final report issued, or a final report completed. And on the page, it goes over 2 pages, 33 to 34. You can then establish the assurance opinion that was given for each of those reviews. There is, I don't know if there's anyone has any questions. Also, at the bottom, we also have the adjustment to the internal audit plan, which includes the reviews that were taken out of the plan and deferred till this year, and those reviews that were added in as part of reactive reviews throughout the year. Anyone have any questions on the 1920 plan?
I have just one little comment, Gail. I think this is a question we've raised at the previous meeting on the lessons learned documents, Brightwells and Memorial Hall. Can you just remind me on the situation there, not just on the availability of the documents, and presumably they're open to all members, but also how lessons learned are implemented?
Well, lessons learned are implemented from the sharing of reviews that we feel that other heads of service or service areas can in actual fact learn from. But generally, the major outcomes instigates training and awareness provided on those areas where we felt that things have not gone as the way we'd wanted them to have gone. And those are usually cascaded through, as I say, training. Other times it can be through the managers group, or it could be through just directly with heads of service through the managers team.
Okay, would you follow that up with heads of service to see on a rolling basis?
Well, generally that's the training is generally where they have a register as to who's actually attended. I don't actually cascade that down myself, because particularly with project management, we had a large training session for all those that were involved in projects to provide a standard methodology that officers should then complete. We also have a procurement officer who obviously keeps people up to date as to what the procurement procedures should be and guides them. But formally, I don't actually go and stand over people to ensure that they've learned a lesson. What I would do is obviously when we carry out a review where it has been an issue raised again relating to the previous lessons learned, and if it hasn't been taken on board, that would then be reported. And of course, obviously that would get reported to the head of service, who would then have to take action to identify to them that there is a training need.
Okay. And where do members actually find those documents?
What the actual reports?
Yes.
My reports. Well, my reports are actually held in Pintana, and I'm not sure members have access to Pintana. I don't know whether Fiona can confirm.
No, Chairman. So if members of the committee have a particular interest in one of Gail's internal audit reports, then they can either ask through you, or I'm sure Gail wouldn't mind them contacting her directly. But I'm sure you wouldn't necessarily want to have be inundated with absolutely everything. I think if you spot anything on the audit plan that you'd like to, any individual councillor would like just to sort of see the end product on, that's absolutely fine. Just contact Gail.
Okay, thank you. We'll do that.
Chairman, Councillor Hyman did actually register to speak on this item.
Hi, Jerry, would you like to add any comment to that item?
Thank you very much, Kimberly. Thank you, Peter. And thank you very much to Gail, because I did, on the same question you've asked there, I did ask earlier in an email. The response that I got is that the report relating to the management of major projects has been provided to the Audit Committee and Vice Chairman of Audit Committee. So you've got it. I was really asking whether I could have it. And I don't think I've had an answer really, because more to the point, this is audit of the council, and we're doing it on behalf of the residents and who we serve. And I guess my question really is if I get hold of that, if I can get hold of it, and I'm requesting it, please. I'm sure it's in a Word or PDF document that can be emailed or put up on the website. But is it public? Would we be able to? Because it's obviously this is an item that people can see the council are doing. It's in the public documents here as existing. That we've done an internal audit on lessons learned from Brightwells and whatever. And I actually think myself that there's probably more lessons to be learned by councillors making the decisions, possibly than the lessons that staff need to learn from it. Because obviously these are major decisions being made by councillors. Sometimes they take the officers' advice, sometimes they don't take the officers' advice. And actually it's the councillors who, as much as, if not more than officers, do need to learn the lessons. So I would very much hope that this sort of thing would be public and would be possibly also be able to go for scrutiny if necessary, because it may well be that there's other lessons that haven't been picked up, and we may need to discuss it. So can we get hold of that? Can we have a definite, please, that we can have one? Can you send me a copy of it, please? And can we make it public, or is there a reason we shouldn't? Thanks.
Up to date, we have never published the reports on our website, but I think it may be something that maybe the Audit Committee would want to consider as to whether they see that as a way forward. One consideration we would have to make is regarding any audit report that has a commercial sensitivity in it, or where we've got, again, it could be one of my reports regarding a personnel nature. Any comments would be appreciated.
So, Chairman, so the answer is yes, councillors can have access to things like that. To the second part of the question, it's an internal document. Whether it could be put in the public arena, I don't know. As Gail just said, it would depend, and we would need to get a view on that. So yes, councillors can, if they want to, see an internal audit report, subject to the sort of issues that Gail's just said, because if there was some personal staff matters in there, then that might be a reason not to put it into wider circulation, or it might be okay. We would have to judge it on a case by case, but certainly Councillor Hyman can see what the Audit Committee members can see.
Thank you, Graham.
Chair, can I ask a question? Okay, not related to that last topic, but just related to page 17 and 18. It's just a question, really. I note that the audit reviews referred from 2019-20 to 2021 as payroll for 7 days. And I also noticed that on page 18, it's got audit reviews added to 2019-2020 was assurance on payroll accuracy. And I just wondered what the difference is. Not that I understand what the difference is, but just have a little bit more sort of detail around the sort of the need to review on payroll accuracy. Is that normal review cycle that we have, or is there something specific that tipped that?
Gail, can you answer that question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The review, generally you have a payroll review that looks at starters, leavers, and the calculation as to how, and making sure that obviously any new starters have been set up correctly on the payroll and the payroll process. The review that was done regarding accuracy was a specific area where there had been changes partially through the employment for whatever reason, reduced hours, etc. And basically it was to give management assurance that when those changes were being made, that those changes were being accurately made. And
Okay,
hence
lovely.
the reason for a supplementary review.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you. Okay, Gail. You're on mute. Are you on mute?
Mine. Sorry. The next paper is relating to the 2020-21, and unfortunately it does look as though we've not been doing a lot, but I can assure you there has been a lot going on in these difficult times, and the contractors and myself are working hard, and you'll see at the moment there isn't much completed, but there is work in progress. In actual fact, the work in progress has extended since I did the review. Has increased. And basically, there is a lot of scoping reports, lots of outlines have now been done regarding those reviews that are to be done in Q1, 2. So a lot of those are actually getting to the stage of field work, which again is an issue that obviously external audit have indicated. It is a bit more difficult to do your audits when you are working remotely because the reliance on other people providing you with the information rather than making appointments to sit with them and gain that information. And basically, as I say, there isn't too much to be reporting back on the current plan for 2021. But if members have any questions that they want to ask, oh, sorry, one other thing I did forget to mention is at the bottom, the adjustments for the internal audit plan. As I mentioned earlier, the outcomes that were suggested as part of the March Audit Committee, they will be added in the September plan that will be presented to the Audit Committee regarding those that are solely responsible for an area, and also the other items that were identified regarding last minutes.
Okay,
so if anyone has any questions.
You have a question mark on the post-payment business grant compliance. That's on page 48. So you're on mute again, Gail.
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, the question mark is that the government haven't actually provided us with what that compliance is going to be. It's where the government are going to be checking to make sure what due diligence processes that we had put in place regarding issuing these grants. But as they haven't actually provided us with the guidance that we should be complying with, internal audit can't complete the audit until they provided that.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, do you want me to just add something on there? Because you know, it's a very good question, because we have paid out over £22 million to local businesses following the government's guidance, and the government funded that as well. But as Gail said, we're very much in the government's hands as to what they want to do in terms of post-payment assurance. And we've had some guidance, but not all. And they've said that they will get that to us end of August, early September. And Peter and his team are awaiting that so that we can make our judgment about what we need to do on that. In fact, we confirmed with John and the Grant Thornton team last week that they don't actually play a role in this on behalf of the government. And even though this is quite high value stuff in total, the government want us to do that in the first instance. And I mean, depending on what they find up and down the country, I guess they may want to dip into that. But when it's not something that I'm particularly concerned about. I think Peter and the team put good controls into that process. So I'm not concerned that the post-payment check, when the government conclude on their requirements of us, is going to throw up a major problem for us.
Okay, thank you.
And I have Councillor Floyd Douglas and Councillor Seaborn.
Mine referred to the previous points that were being discussed. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I was going to
yes,
answer the question that Graham just answered, so that's great. Good to hear that. Clearly, the whole internal audit plan for this year has been thrown into, I won't say chaos. Gail seems to be doing a remarkably good job of managing a very difficult situation. But I guess it's reasonable to expect that the plan for the year probably needs to be revisited and reordered to allow for the reality. So, I think she's to be congratulated for the excellent performance last year and the fact that resources are being used as well as they are able at the moment. Can we actually expect to see a fairly significant revamp of the plan with reprioritisation of items in the near future? Thanks.
I'm actually hoping not, but I'm always optimistic, even as an auditor. But as I say, we don't know what's really going to be happening in the next 6 months or so, really. But all I can say is our internal auditor contractor are doing their utmost to keep to the plan as much as they can. But as I mentioned earlier, I know that I will be revising the plan anyway in September, even if it's not to take anything out, it's to add other things in. Bearing in mind those things that are added in may be things that I may be completing, or it may be the contractor. But time will tell, and I just thank you for giving me the support that's required.
Okay, thank you, Gail. That completes that item.
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Recommendation that the Audit Committee notes the contents of the Internal Audit Plan 2019-20 Progress Report as attached at Annex 1 and the Internal Audit Plan 2020-21 attached in Annex 2. Is that agreed?
Agreed, Chairman.
Thank you all. Okay, moving on to item 10, which is the Internal Audit Charter, page 51 to 62. Gail again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is the Internal Audit Charter, and members may remember you had the charter come to you last year, and there was some minor changes that were made then. And what I have done in this report is some other minor changes which are in green, just changing the emphasis in some of the paragraphs. They are minor changes, but I did feel it was worthwhile to provide it to the committee to endorse the charter for this year.
Okay.
Councillor Floyd Douglas has her hand up, Chair.
Thank you.
It's one for Gail, really. So I looked through this, and on page 56, I think it looks brilliant, by the way, Gail. On page 56, you've got on definitions 2, then 2.1. The final paragraph is mission of internal audit is to enhance and protect organisation value by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice and insight. The only thing I feel is missing, as I think I did last year, is the word timely. And that's it, really. That's my input.
Thank you. Can I take that and add that into that particular paragraph? And if the Audit Committee agree, I can put that as a recommendation to recommend that I include timely,
Okay, thank you.
so that I can then make that a final if members have no objection.
Yes, I would go with that. Members agree?
Yeah, good point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have no other indications, Chairman.
Did that email from Jerry indicate he wished to speak on item 11 on page? No, got the right page.
Yes, it was item 11, Chairman.
Jerry, do you wish to say anything?
I thought that you might invite the officers to introduce the item first. I don't know.
Say again, you wish to invite the officers to?
We're only on item 10 at the moment, Chairman.
Oh, sorry. Okay. That's item 11. Got the wrong one. Okay, apologies. That's on page 3. Yeah, okay. Good. So how are we doing that then? Is that completed, that item?
I believe so, Chairman.
The recommendation is that the Audit Committee approves the Internal Audit Charter as attached in Annex 1. Is that agreed?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. So moving on to item 11, Annual Internal Audit Report 2019 to 20, pages 63 to 78.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a report relating to the Annual Internal Audit Report. Now, the Annual Internal Audit Report gives an overview of the work being completed in 1920 and the outcome of the work in 1920. I then assess to provide an assurance opinion that's included then in the annual governance statement as part of the work that's been completed by internal audit to support the governance arrangements that we have in place at Waverley. The actual audit report and opinion, as I say, it provides clear opinion as to how the internal control framework is working at Waverley, which is included in page 70, running over to page 71. And page 72 gives an indication of the areas of the work that's been completed as to whether it's been cross-cutting, corporate priorities, corporate governance, financial management and IT, which, looking at the chart on 72, page 72, shows that there isn't one area in particular that gets more coverage than any other. So I feel that we give a balanced coverage. Considering the IT is slightly smaller, but bearing in mind any internal audit that's done doesn't just look at the manual process, it does provide recommendations relating any IT functionality within those systems as well. So the IT reviews are generally reviews specifically relating to IT areas within the IT service. Sorry about that. And on page 73, as you can see there, we haven't had any no assurance this year for 1920, and the majority are sitting more in the adequate. I don't know whether members have got any other questions they may wish to ask on that.
On the internal audit plan, where you've got percentages, are they actuals achieved, or the requirement is you block those times to those different areas? Is that coming from like timesheet records?
Yes, that comes to the volume of days that we've actually spent on those reviews, the percentage of the plan.
Yeah. Okay. Richard, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. On page 77, section 10, just comparing the format for this year with last year, we've lost a couple of performance metrics for the which cover the number of days between closeout and draft report, and then the number of days to the final report. And I found those quite useful, not least because they were telling a very good story about performance last year. Is there any reason why those have been omitted? Because I think there'd be a useful metric for members to see how effectively internal audit's performing. Thank you.
Yes, those were very good measures, and they can be reintroduced again, not a problem. But the reason I had taken them out was to make them comparable with the rest of the authorities that the Southern Internal Audit Partnership are dealing with. Because we're going to be going through a compliance with the Institute of Internal Auditors as part of their review, meeting the public sector internal auditing standards. And yes, I can actually include, say, these are our local ones, as well as the ones obviously we use for the contractor as well. So I take your point on board. If members wish me to include them back in again, I haven't got a problem with that.
Thank you, Gail. I think Councillor Hyman has his hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Peter. This is I'd like to thank Gail very much indeed for getting back to me so promptly this afternoon on the questions that I had. And in respect of this one, you have to excuse me. I'm on my other computer. I'm zapping backwards and forwards between emails and audit papers and things. It's quite awkward. I asked in respect of the top of page 64, where it tells us that, let me see, I've got that on a piece of paper. There's an additional review relating to the ethics and culture has been deferred to 2021 as the governance review has not been finalised. And I asked about that, but Gail's just said the governance review hasn't been finalised. Obviously to residents, and we're doing this for residents who are sat at home and someone might be reading these documents, they may see that where it says that, hey, we're meant to be doing an audit of ethics and the culture at Waverley. And that's been put off, which, we perhaps from the inside understand that this is just time and COVID and the rest of it, but it's a big red flag to any member of the public who's reading that document. I may well think, well, hang on a minute, they would say that, wouldn't they, or it would be put off. So clearly Gail can't say when the governance review is likely to be completed, and so she's reliant upon that. I had wondered whether the monitoring officer perhaps, or the chief executive officer, who I don't think is with us at this meeting, might be able to tell us when the governance review is going to be coming back before us. Because obviously that is something we did early on in the new administration, and it's sat there doing nothing for 9 months or so, I believe, and we really ought to be at least as councillors asking when it's going to come forward, and that's what I'm doing. Thank you. If I can have an answer to that, and there's one other quick point if possible.
Chairman, can I pick up on that, because I don't know, and I don't suppose Gail does, but if Gail does know when that governance review is coming forward, then clearly she'll answer. But we'll take that question and get an answer and make sure that Councillor Hyman and the members of the committee get an answer to that.
Thank you, Graham. That's very kind of you. I'd also asked in respect of the middle bullet on page 59, in item 9, it's mentioned, middle bullet says that it is the responsibility of audit to ensure compliance, legal compliance, and also on page 74 under this item. And my question was what systems and processes exist to enable residents and members and the independent internal audit function to hold the leadership and the monitoring and legal functions to account in respect of legal compliance and fraud prevention without having to resort to high court action, because obviously, the accountability depends upon being able to hold people accountable, and that's what the whole purpose, you could say, of this committee. The response that I've had to that is that residents can go through the complaints process and can fall back on the external auditors. Quite a long drawn out thing for for residents, and we've learned from a long time ago that third parties, very often you can't get them to act anyway against the council, so it would be a member of the public having to go to the courts. Members would be directly with the monitoring officer and the standards committee again, and internal audits, I can hardly read that in these glasses, will initially raise any concerns relating to the legal compliance and fraud prevention concerns if sufficient evidence is obtained, discuss with management board. If no action is taken, it will be discussed with the external auditors. I mean, there are a couple of issues I've been bringing up as a member of the public for 10 years and as a councillor for the past 4 years, and it really is a matter of where does one go with this. It seems to me the answer to that is directly to Gail and to push through there. Is that the situation that we go through internal audit, and internal audit will be entirely independent?
Well, it does depend on what it is it's going to be have to be looked at and the concerns that are being raised. Because bearing in mind, even on the website, we do have an area even for anyone to raise concerns regarding fraud-related matters.
Does that answer your question,
Okay,
Jeremy?
That's enough. Yes, I won't go further than that this evening. Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and thank you, Gail and Graham.
Are there any more questions to Gail on this item?
No one's indicating, Chairman.
Okay, in that case, there's a recommendation. The Audit Committee considers and notes the annual or internal audit report and audit opinion for 2019-20. Is that agreed?
Agreed, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 12, which is the fraud investigation summary, pages 79 to 84. Again, over to Gail.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is the fraud investigation summary, and I have included in tonight's papers Annex 1, which was for the full year from 1st of April 2019 to 31st of March 2020. And then on Annex 2, we have the first quarter for the 1st of April to the 30th of June. And the content of this report, you can see we have had, it looks as though we have been out doing lots of investigations in the first quarter, but as I have indicated before to members, a lot of cases take some time to actually materialise and come to an end conclusion. And it just so happened that a few of the cases that we had have closed now, which has resulted in some cases the property being returned back to Waverley's housing stock. And you can see there on the Annex 1 that the total that we've achieved, bearing in mind, obviously, as I've mentioned before with members, these are indicative amounts based on the figures provided by the Cabinet Office, which every authority that's carrying out work of this sort uses. And you can see therefore the total of the year then was 897,000, just short of 880,000, and which was made up of not just recovering properties, but an exercise that we completed regarding the NFI and data matching, and one instance where we stopped disability facilities grant being issued when the applicants were not entitled. You can see on the first quarter for this year, we have in actual fact recovered properties, 3 properties, which means, sorry, 2 properties we've recovered, which means we've achieved quite a bit in the first part of first quarter of this year. And I don't know whether members have any questions that they want to ask.
Councillor Cole has his hand up.
Chairman, thank you. 2 points. In terms of the social housing fraud, you note 6 properties handed back and 5 court cases. So does that mean that essentially you only get a property back if you go to court? And the second point, which is historic, and I've probably asked before, looking back to the early years, at the bottom of that table, there were more properties handed back in the early 2 years and fewer recently. Was something systemic that meant there was more of a problem 3 and 4 years ago? So there's 2 questions.
Regarding the properties that we get back, it can be that, sorry, I forgot, lost my trail of thread there. I'll answer the actually, can you repeat the question to make sure I get them the right?
The first question was that you've indicated 6 properties handed back, and in the last column 5 court cases. Does that mean essentially you only get property back if you go to court? I mean, is that come on? Did you take it from that, or is that more complex than that? That's the first question.
It can be more. It can actually. Can we say it can be more simple than that? Sometimes we can get cases back without going to court. But those cases where we had gone to court were cases that were maybe long-standing cases that had taken some time, and because the other avenues were not open to go down, we then had to go down the route of the courts. And what we must always consider as well is to go down the court route. It is more expensive, but in some of the instances we've had in the past where we've had tenants who have continued to not treat the property the way they should have done for numerous years, and they're then not willing to give up the property, we then have to take the decision as to which action we're going to take, and that can just result in us having to take them to court.
Do we recover costs in those cases if the court finds for us or not?
Generally, because the people that we're dealing with are maybe on housing benefit, the likelihood of us obtaining the cost back is very minimal, unless there has been a case where someone has actually been profiting from the misuse of the property. We would then put proceeds of crime report in to try and establish whether we can get some money back.
Okay, and the second point was the early years showed more cases. Was there something which caused that? Yeah.
Initially, we didn't have the resource that we now have the investigating of these cases, because previously these would have been dealt with by housing officers, housing management, and as you can imagine, the workload that they had, they didn't have the time to deal with these type of cases, and hence when we got the opportunity to have this resource for investigation of housing tenancy fraud cases, we were then able to catch up. So there was a bit of a backlog when I mentioned before about cases that had maybe been properties not being used properly for numerous years, and then when we had those resources, we then addressed those issues, and therefore that's why initially there was a lot more cases that coming forward.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you. Sorry for
question, Chair, if there's time.
Actually, do you wish to speak?
Go ahead.
Yes, please. It would just be interesting to get a little bit more background behind the sort of right to buy fraud, because I hadn't sort of seen one of those before. I've seen all the others, so just a little couple of minutes on that would be quite interesting. Thank you.
No problem. Right to buy fraud, there can be, there is a few areas where basically a claimant or a tenant can put in an application to right to buy, but there is a specific criteria that they have to fulfill. And one of those criteria is that the property that they're residing at, their property, should be their sole and principal residence. So therefore, if a tenant is deemed to be not living at the property and is off living maybe with a partner somewhere else, and they may have maybe another family member living at the property, or they could actually have someone totally not a family member and they're actually collecting rent from that person. When we carry out an investigation, obviously we do background checks to actually establish whether the information that's provided by the tenant, putting in the right to buy application, we then check to make sure that that information has been accurately reflected on the application. And therefore, when we establish that that is not the case, we then have to complete an investigation to establish why the tenant hasn't been residing at the property and why they've not been using it for the purposes that they were provided with that property.
And does this take time, Gail, this whole
Sorry?
process? Does it take time, that end-to-end process?
Yes, it can take a lot of time.
Okay, thank you.
But we have to weigh up the benefits of someone misusing our properties and us not being able to give that property to somebody who's sitting on our waiting list waiting for a property. Because again, we have to appreciate that when a right to buy goes in, we've actually lost that property, and then they can wait for a certain length of time and then they can sell that property on again. Obviously they get a discount.
And
the
take
discount is, yeah, the discount's not as great as it was initially when the right to buy process came in, but if they've actually held the property for quite a long length of time, we're talking over £80,000 discount, up to about £80,000 discount that they can get.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Gail. I'm just picking up a little bit on Councillor Cole's comments. When you look at those totals, the financial value totals on page 84, they're almost of a muchness except for the 1 year, 2018, 2019, which is very low. But even this quarter for this coming year is within bounds. I mean, it's a bit high maybe, but certainly not out of it's not out of the norm. I'm just wondering, with COVID-19 if maybe affecting tenants' abilities, are you expecting a more sort of exaggerated problem as the year progresses?
I'm not very sure about what effect that would, what COVID is going to be having. I would hoping that more people would be actually staying in the property that they should be staying in. But in other cases, it will be highlighting, because people are at home, neighbours, etc. They may be more, not always what you say, more open. They might be more aware that people that should be there are not there at the property. And therefore there could be a bit of an increase as to the amount of people, in effect, raising concerns that the tenant isn't living at the property.
Okay. Any other questions, Gail, on this item? No.
No one indicating.
Thank you. Then we have a recommendation. Audit Committee notes the results of the fraud investigation activity attached in Annex 1. That's for the full year, 1st of April 2019 to 31st of March 2020, and Annex 2 for the first quarter, 1st of April 2020 to 30th of June 2020. Is that agreed?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 13, the Audit Committee Recurrent Annual Work Programme on page 85. Is there anything here you wish to comment on, Gail?
No, Mr. Chairman. I think with the amendments that were suggested, I think at the last Audit Committee regarding external audit papers, I think that's been addressed. And there's nothing really from my side.
Any comment from members?
Councillor Seaborn.
Richard.
Thanks, Chairman. So the last time we discussed the annual governance report would have been March, and at some stage it presumably needs to be to come in front of the committee for a last time before it's signed off. That's not appearing here. The only governance item is November, which is an interim review of next, early drafts of next year. So is that something we should be looking at? Thank you.
Chairman, it's Graham. So that will come along in September alongside the accounts. That's the plan for the committee to look at. I mean, the order this happens is the leader and the chief exec signed it off as a sort of a backward look statement of governance arrangements in place in the previous year, and then the audit committee look at it. And you would normally be looking in March and July, as you say, Councillor Seaborn, but because the accounts are not coming up until September, the two sit alongside each other, and so the final one will be coming to this committee in September, because it's actually published with the final accounts once the audit committee have approved both.
Thank you, Graham. Any other questions? No. Then can I ask the committee to note the work programme?
So sorry, Chair, if I could come in. Here's John Roberts. Because of the changes in the timetable this year, the September meeting should more correctly include from external audit our audit findings report, and then the November meeting would be the annual audit letter.
Okay. Are you happy with that, Gail?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is actually the, if external audits say that's when they're going to be providing their reports, that's when they're going
That's
to
when they do it.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you, John. Okay, so that's item 13 completed. Moving on to the last item, 14. Are there any items to discuss in exempt session?
No indications, Chairman.
Okay, well, in that case, I think we've completed our meeting. Can I declare the meeting now closed? Thank you all very much. And thank you once again for Gail carrying the brunt of the work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.